Hey guys, this is Tony Paradis. I'm a licensed dietitian and personal trainer with food and fitness. Check out the website at foodandfitnessonline.com. I'll go ahead and link that there below. Today, we're going to talk about low volume training, or in other words, known as high intensity training. That's what HIIT stands for. Not to be confused with high intensity interval training. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of low volume training. We're going to talk about who is it for, some obstacles to our traditional standards of weight training, how to implement it, and why this is special. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the history of high-intensity training. High-intensity training started around the 1970s with a guy named Arthur Jones. And Arthur Jones was an entrepreneur and an inventor, and he invented the Nautilus machine. So that's really where Nautilus came about. What's special about them is they have a cam that kind of matches the curvature of the strength curve when you're lifting. That isn't really important except to just kind of go over the history a little bit. Then we have Mike Menster, who was a big fan of HIIT. He competed in Olympia, and then of course Dorian Yates, which was a Mr. Olympia, and he followed kind of a protocol like high intensity training. So it started in the 1970s, and it got a lot of backlash from like the Arnold Schwarzeneggerian style of training. Man, I really botched that up. But basically you have on one side you have the high intensity training. And that is going to be very low volume. It's characterized by often a single set performed to failure. Then you have on the other side your super high volume training, which is going to be, you know, like doing 10 or 20 sets of a muscle group, just blasting it into oblivion and going on from there. So we have two extremes. You know, who does this work for? First of all, let's talk about, before I get into who it works for and if it even does work, let's talk about some obstacles for newbies, for all you noobs out there trying to get into shape. And I have a new client with me today that's agreed, an old friend who's agreed to be a science experiment for me with the high intensity training. I've actually used this before with success with some clients. But I was like, hey man, you want to get into shape and you only want to spend about 30 minutes a week doing it? All right, so that's the hook. You guys are going to have to stay tuned to find out. But let's talk about those obstacles for newbies. Number one, and we kind of touched on this, is time commitment. Okay? So if you have to get in shape and you plan on spending an hour 3 or 4 times a week, that can be a big deterrent, especially if you haven't been doing any exercise before. Number one is time commitment. Number two is pain and discomfort. Well, delayed onset muscle soreness is is activated a lot when you do a super high volume of training. So if you look at doing multiple sets, multiple reps, really smashing a muscle and just obliterating it, you're going to be very, very sore the next day. For often people, that's a big deterrent from continuing on with a workout program. So we're thinking of beginners here with the newbies. Complexity. Complexity is an issue, especially with weight training. If you compare it to something like jogging, you just get on the street, you go run. Compare it to something with a very well-detailed strength and conditioning program, maybe for an athlete or something like that, as far as knowing how to do certain lifts and keeping up with set schemes, rep schemes, tempo, all that sort of stuff can get very complex in certain types of workouts. So high-intensity training is pretty straight and to the point. And then finally, perceived difficulty. So if you just even have that perception that you're going to have to work out, you're going to have to do it for many, many months, 4 times a week for an hour or something like that, that can even keep people from taking that first step. So those are some of the obstacles for newbies. So why do high-intensity training, and how does it overcome those obstacles? Number one, time commitment is a typical high-intensity training program for a newbie, for a beginner, is only going to take about 10 or 15 minutes. The frequency is going to be about 2 to 3 times per week. So now that's something you can really sell somebody on who's beginning a weight training program. You're only going to have to work out for maybe 30 to 45 minutes a week, and you're going to see progress and you're going to see those results. Pain and discomfort. All right. There's always going to be some sort of pain and discomfort, especially with high-intensity training. It's during the actual workout. But as far as doing so many sets that you can't get up and walk the next day, typically This isn't something that you're going to see except maybe in the first few days of training, but it's going to be much, much less compared to maybe doing 5 sets of a squat as opposed to 1. Complexity. A big thing about high-intensity training is just keeping it simple, keeping it straightforward, and that can be a selling point, and also perceived difficulty. I mean, we talked about how long it takes and how straightforward it is. It's a great program for getting people started. So, moving on, before we get to the finer points of my protocol here, is who does high-intensity training work best for, or who does low-volume training work best for? Is number one, it works best for beginners. So, coming back to talking about Arthur Jones and Nautilus, Mike Menster, these guys were trained bodybuilders, and they really believed that high-intensity training was the end-all, be-all for athletes, for bodybuilders, for people wanting to build muscle, get into the best shape of their life, and it's all a bunch of bull. Okay? High-intensity training is one of many tools. It's not the end-all, be-all, and what I found in my practice is that it is great for beginners, but the right type of beginner. So, the right type of beginner who, number one, records their workouts. Okay? You have to record your workout because it's very methodical and it's very straightforward. Let's compare a high-intensity push-up compared to maybe a typical boot camp workout or something like that. In a high-intensity push-up, you got one set you're trying to do. Okay, so you do those push-ups and you have to know exactly what you did last time and push past that or at least to it in order to progress. Where you take kind of a more lackadaisical approach with working out, where you're doing multiple sets, kind of doing a bunch of this, bunch of that, you have a lot of crossover. You have a lot of layers that sort of intersect with each other, so you don't have to be as accurate because you're doing so much of everything that you're probably going to be taken care of. Okay? Now, of course, there's going to be exceptions to that, but just work with me, guys, and moving on. All right. Number 3, and this one's important as well, is you want to start off with a client that already has, not necessarily super high, but an above average kinesthetic intelligence or access to machines. So what I mean by that is kinesthetic intelligence is your body intelligence, your ability to tell where you are in time, in space, knowing how to listen to your body and things like that. If you're working with free weights, there is a skill component to that. There's a little bit of balance, core activation, some complexity to that. So if you get somebody that is absolutely starting off new, has never played high school sports, doesn't do any kind of physical activity, you can even take something like working on your car or doing something mechanical or something with your hands. We'll give you higher kinesthetic intelligence. All right, if you take somebody who has none of that, then doing a free weight training version of high-intensity training, I would not recommend that. I would recommend doing more and more sets, kind of a traditional style, because you're going to need more practice on building up that skill component. Or access to machines. If you have a machine, it's driven on a rail, it's guided by a cable, and there's not much of a skill component. You can throw anybody on there. You can throw grandma on the leg press machine, and with a minute or two of coaching, you can get her doing leg press. If you're trying to teach them the barbell squat, okay, big difference there. So that's why I come up with that point. Also consistent. You have to be consistent. You can't skip workouts. That's not special really for any kind of workout routine, but it's especially important for high-intensity training. Also, the ability to push hard and to have some sort of tolerance for discomfort. Here's your trade-off. High-intensity training is high intensity, okay? So you're going to feel some pain, some discomfort, some very difficult exertion during the workout. But your trade-off is it's only 10 minutes. So you can decide, whether you kind of like to take a moderate approach to it or you just want to hit it hard, get it done with all in 10 minutes. That's the trade-off, folks. So if you are a baby, if you're a crybaby, and you just can't seem to feel any sort of discomfort or anything like that, guess what? High-intensity training is not for you. Maybe go check out a Zumba class or something like that. So, all right. Let's move on, make sure my big fat head isn't in the way. Okay, so here's going to be our high-intensity training protocol. And guys, my marker started to run out, so I will post this information below, so feel free to check that out. But this is our minimal equipment, big and basics routine. So my client here, Rob, doesn't have a gym. He wants to work out from home, so we're taking a very basic approach, not using but minimal equipment. He has a pull-up bar, so we're going to work with that. So here is the outline of the high-intensity training program that you can write for yourself. Now, I did not write down specific exercises. You'll see that later in the video. But what I did was I kind of gave you guys some fundamentals. So because you're going to be doing this routine back to back to back, and I'll get over the protocol later, what I found is that it's beneficial not to do like 2 leg exercises, 2 arm exercises or whatever, because you start getting fatigued as you go on. I like to sandwich them between an upper body, a lower body, and kind of going on from there. So without further ado, here are the 6 exercises. 5 are mandatory. 1 is going to be more optional depending on what kind of shape you're in. Let's look at this. Number 1 is going to be a squatting movement. Okay, that can be a squat, a lunge, whatever, some sort of squatting movement. A rowing movement, a leg curl or a Romanian deadlift type of movement to work the hamstrings and the glutes. If we can't do a leg curl or Romanian deadlift, we may also opt to do some sort of glute bridge to break that up into pieces and get some glute activation there. It really just depends on your goals and where you're at and where you're going. A horizontal press, so this is going to be like a bench press, a push-up. Today we'll be doing a push-up or a push-up variation depending on where he's at, and an ab exercise. Okay, so for some people starting off, that's going to be planks. For some of you, you may be able to do some sit-ups, some leg raises, something like that. And number 6, optional, is going to be a vertical or an incline press. So if you're just totally zonked by the time you do your push-ups and you don't have anything else to give into your shoulders, you may want to come to that one later. For example, the incline variation press that we're going to be doing today with my client, he's going to be putting his feet up on a box and doing a push-up. He may or may not be strong enough to do an appropriate number of reps with that, so it may be something he'll have to come back to. So that's why that number 6 of the vertical or incline press is going to be optional depending on what you can handle and what equipment that you have. Okay, so that's a little bit of history and a little bit of overview of high-intensity training. Let's talk about my protocol. Everybody has a different protocol for this, and let's talk about mine. Sorry about the glare there, guys. All right, number 1 is we're going to try to perform an exercise between 6 to 18 repetitions. Okay, that's going to be the lower end of the kind of the strength hypertrophy curve and kind of the upper end of the hypertrophy getting into muscular endurance. All right, so you're going to see benefits in strength, you're going to see benefits in size, you're going to see benefits in muscular endurance from doing this protocol. We're going to do a 4-second eccentric phase of the contraction. So the eccentric phase is also known as the negative or the lowering part of the weight. For example, if I'm doing a push-up, this is going to be the positive or the concentric phase. The eccentric is as I lower myself down. Okay? And that's where we're going to have some control in there. We're going to do a 4-second eccentric phase of the contraction, about 1 second coming up, so an average of 5 seconds for each rep. Okay? Short rest. And I don't mean short rest as in we're going to do a bunch of circuits, but after every exercise, we're going to move on to the next one. And that's going to give us anaerobic conditioning, which is just another benefit. Remember, this workout is for newbies. Okay? So with an advanced athlete, obviously for anaerobic conditioning, I'm going to take them outside and do sprints. And I'm going to do my strength training in pieces. But for a beginner, they can do a high-intensity training program for months, for many months. It really just depends. And as long as they're seeing progress, as long as they're seeing benefits with it, there's no reason that they'll have to do something more complicated or something that's going to take more time. I recommend a 3-time-a-week frequency. You can probably get away with 2 times a week, but I strongly recommend a 3-time-a-week. That's going to be working out with a day of rest in between. And you want to improve every workout. And what do I mean by improve every workout? What I mean is that you're going to add an extra rep until you get to that 18 reps, and then you're going to change the exercise or take your current exercise and add more weight and make it more difficult, or, like I said, choose a more difficult exercise. If you can't increase a rep, I want you to at least keep the same amount of reps that you're doing and try to improve either the form of the exercise or take an extra long time coming down. Maybe instead of a 4-second eccentric contraction, On the last rep, you're going to go for a 10 or 15 second, and then next time you should be able to get an extra rep. All right, finally, let's wrap it up. Rob is ready to work out. He's ready to get his butt kicked in the next 10 minutes. But first, and most importantly, because I wrote down most important, it is the most important. Look, high-intensity training, some people swear that it's the best thing in the world. Some people say that it's the absolute dumbest thing in the world. Here's what I want you to consider. There's an individual component to everything that you do in exercise. Certain people can do certain lifts, certain people can't. Certain people respond better from lower rep ranges, from higher rep ranges. In the high-intensity program, it is very important to record your workouts. We talked about that. So, if you're recording your workouts, you know if you're progressing. So the most important thing to high-intensity training is no progress, don't do it. It's really that simple, guys. If you don't see any progress, or for some reason you're not able to push hard enough or be consistent or whatever these things, for whatever reason, is if you're not able to do more push-ups, more sit-ups, or whatever exercise you have, pick a different routine. Do something else. You don't have to hate on high-intensity training. It may work for some other people. For me, guess what? I don't do high-intensity training. I like more of like a powerlifting routine, and guess what? I'm training for a powerlifting competition coming up in December. But if you're a beginner and you want 10-minute long workouts, maybe 15, just really depends. If you want short workouts, if you want something that feels intense, that really makes you feel like you worked out that day, and is straightforward, simple, something you can do with minimal equipment, I recommend checking out high-intensity training. Eventually, it will stop working for you, just like any sort of workout program, just like anything out there. You can't just keep doing the same workout forever. This is what's called, in a layman terms, muscle confusion, or as I like to refer to it, periodization or nonlinear periodization, or some sort of aspect of that. Eventually it stops working and you're going to have to do something else. So you can either, if you're already an advanced athlete, maybe you can do a hybrid high-intensity training workout. This is a great time saver. Let's say you're doing all your big basic lifts, you only have 5 minutes left to work out, and you still have to do biceps and triceps. Why not just take a single set, take it to failure, and move on from there? You could do a hybrid if you're trying to get out of high-intensity training, that's what you've been doing, and move on to something else. You can start maybe adding a couple extra sets here, a couple of extra sets there, and move on. So we're going to be taking Rob through our workout, and I almost forgot to mention something very important. Is for our protocol. What we're going to also focus on is we're going to train to failure, or at least at as close to failure as you can handle. So in other words, you're only doing one set, so you got to take that muscle to the brink to where you can't do a controlled, appropriate contraction in good form, and that's when you hit failure. So now that I've explained high-intensity training, I've gone over the history, I've gone over the obstacles for newbies, I've gone over the who does it work best for, a basic program, my protocol, and obviously the most important thing is, guys, you got to make sure that it works and that you're progressing. Let's get into it.
All right, so you can see me here. I'm warming up my client, just getting his body ready for exercise, basically lubricating the joints. Let me give you a little bit of background on this client. This is my friend. He was in China for the past year, and he enjoyed a sedentary lifestyle, smoking lots of Chinese cigarettes. So he's really starting from square one, getting back into shape. One thing that I didn't mention in the protocol for the high-intensity training on training to failure is, yes, it's for beginners, but if it's your first day exercising, if it's your first week exercising, you don't have to go completely full throttle. In other words, just go through the motions, get yourself back into shape. Okay, so you can see Rob is taking a 4-second negative phase of his contraction. So in other words, he's lowering himself slowly and coming up at a normal speed. There we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and then back up. So that's about the tempo that you guys want to keep. So this is our first exercise. Of course, it's a squat. I said you can do any kind of squatting motion to keep it simple, bare bones. That's our 5 to 6 exercise regimen. And it's important that he keeps good form, or as good a form as he can, while performing this exercise. So he's able to get, I believe, 16 reps of those. Okay, now we have a pulling motion. So we're using the gymnastics rings. He's got his feet up on a box. He's pulling himself up at a normal speed and lowering himself down, slow and controlled. This helps put the muscles with a little more time under tension. Just gives a little more stimulation there, and also helps him to stay in control. When you're lifting with the tempo, you tend to typically not hurt yourself as much just because of the control aspect there. As he gets stronger, he will be able to progress toward regular pull-ups, and I think he got 6. No, I believe he got 8 of these. Okay, so moving on. Now, remember we said that he doesn't have a lot of equipment to exercise with, so you can see here that we're doing mostly calisthenics, and this is actually called a sliding leg board curl. And what you can do is you can put 2 little towels on your linoleum. You can't see the other half of Rob. He's hanging out on the rubber floor, but he's sliding his legs toward his glutes and then lifting his glutes at the same time. So this is both a hamstring and a gluteal exercise. This is one of the few that you can do without equipment to target the hamstrings and the glutes. If you're not strong enough to do this one, you can do a floor glute bridge or a glute bridge off of a bench. And he actually really killed this one. I think he got 12 or 13 reps on this one before he got gassed. So a big thing with high intensity training is also that you do each exercise back to back to back. So the limiting factor is going to be your muscles during each exercise, but how much you can also do as you go along is going to depend on your cardiovascular abilities there. You know, we're doing kind of an anaerobic, possibly getting into aerobic conditioning near the end. It just depends on how much you hustle between the exercises. And for Rob, we had to take a couple breaks just to let him adjust. He's not quite up to par yet to be able to do each one back to back to back, but that is the idea there. Okay, and finally, the most important thing of high intensity training is write down what you do, record it, and then next time you try to do a little bit more, or if you're at the top of your reps, either add weight. Guys, check us out on Facebook, Facebook.com/food and fitness. Thanks.